one of my family members actually sort of, said to me when I was doing my final school exams, we don't understand why you're so stressed out about the whole school exam thing. Like, you're not going to go anywhere and do anything anyway, so it's kind of pointless. And in essence, that was kind of like waving a red flag at me because I went, "Ooh, hang on, no, 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 that's not where we're going." And it actually probably gave me that stubborn and kind of persistent streak in the sense that I went, no, in actual fact, I'm going to prove you wrong.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Pudding.
And welcome to Chocolate and Coffee Break. And I hope you've got your favourite chocolate and your favourite cuppa and you're ready to listen to a story of compassion and resilience. So today's guest is someone who has been doing that. She's living a life of compassion and really challenging us to think about the choices that we make and how we live our life. So Fiona Demark has been legally blind since birth, yet she steps into the adventures that most of us would never dream of, where others might see limits, she finds possibilities, and in the process shows us what resilience and courage can look like in everyday life. So let's take a chocolate and coffee break with Fiona and listen to her story of resilience, choice, and her adventurous spirit. So welcome, Fiona.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming along, and I know we're going to have a lot of fun on this conversation. So, Fiona, I like to start with a question from my little question pack. When people look at you, what do you wish they would see?
I think for all of us, we want to be seen as individuals. We don't want to be put in a little box and said, okay, this is what we think that you're like. So as soon as people do see me with the white cane, for example, straight away they go, oh, blind person. And so then it kind of creates this little image that people have and a set of expectations around who a blind person is, what they can do, and what they might be like. And I'm not just a blind person. I'm a million other things at the same time. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm an owner of a crazy cat. Like, there's all of these things that make up who I am as well as my blindness. So it's a kind of reminder, I think, for everybody to just kind of take everybody as they come and treat them as individuals. And just because our unconscious bias wants to put people in a box and say this is what we think you might be like, to actually go past that and break into that idea of thinking, well, maybe that's not true. What is this person really like and who are they?
Fabulous. Yeah, we do need to look at how the truth of who people are. And yes, let's find out who you are. So, Fiona, I want to know a little bit about your story about what does it actually mean to be legally blind, and what is your actual condition that causes your blindness?
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in far western New South Wales, and the resources weren't really great out there. And it sort of, my parents realised that there was something not quite right with my vision when I was quite young. And we went off to South Australia, to Adelaide, to see the eye specialist. And the answer was really quite vague at that time because we're thinking sort of, late 70s, early 80s, and they didn't really have a lot of understanding about the different types of things that were going on when we sort of got into the nitty-gritty. So they just kind of said, well, you've got a retinal disease. What we know about retinal diseases is the likelihood is that it is going to deteriorate. So you're probably going to go blind one day, but we're not entirely sure what it is, and we don't know really how to manage it, or, there's no way of stopping it. And so that was a really big thing to take away. But in essence, it was actually a good thing that I was told when I was really young because it gave me that ability to adapt. And again, due to where I grew up, there weren't a lot of services and resources in place to actually support me, which at the time was really tricky. But now I look back with hindsight and think, you know what, like that actually taught me to be adaptable and resilient. And so now the eyesight has deteriorated. I'm probably left with about 5% of vision. However, because I have been able to adapt and be resilient and think about different ways of doing things, because that's essentially been what life has always been like, it's allowed me to not only deal with my disability really well, but also to, I guess, transfer that into other parts of life where, we all face obstacles and things don't go right. But I've been able to sort of move that thinking to dealing with other stuff that doesn't always go right in life.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey which most of us, well, we don't understand if we're not blind of what it would be like. But I'm really curious about how people respond to someone who's blind. Let's start there and I'll ask the next question. So how
And
do
look, I
people
think,
respond?
yeah, and I think um it's dependent on the person and it depends on, I guess, relationships. So one thing that happened when I was quite young is the response was, okay, well, we're going to set up a whole set of expectations around what we think you're capable of. And I think people still do that to some extent. But that capability and expectation when I was young was, okay, well, we expect that you're going to stay in this little country town, that you're probably not going to get a job, you're probably going to be on welfare all of your life, that you're not going to be able to meet the dreams and goals that everybody automatically sort of assumes of life and thinks, okay, well, you're not going to have a family, you're probably not going to have a job, there's no career, there's no sort of, none of those things that we just kind of take for granted. And one of my family members actually sort of, said to me when I was doing my final school exams, we don't understand why you're so stressed out about the whole school exam thing. Like you're not going to go anywhere and do anything anyway, so it's kind of pointless. And in essence, that was kind of like waving a red flag at me because I went, "Ooh, hang on, no, 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 that's not where we're going." And it actually probably gave me that stubborn and kind of persistent streak in the sense that I went, no, in actual fact, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that was the catalyst to go, no, well, I am going to finish the exams. I'm going to get good enough marks that will enable me to go to university. And that was my ticket to the rest of my life, basically, because it gave me an opportunity to break away from all of those expectations, move to a new place, and kind of recreate myself and start over and let people learn who I was rather than having all of those expectations.
Yeah, because I imagine that people do have those expectations. I mean, they're put on everybody. There's certain expectations put on everybody, but
Hmm.
they kind of set you a low bar, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
we often will operate to the expectations of other people. Like if everybody's telling you that this is what we expect from you, and, it works in both directions. If people have high expectations, then you'll go up and achieve those high things because people are pushing you, pushing you, pushing you. But if people are going the other way and pushing you downwards, then, it's very hard sometimes to be able to, take that step away and say, hey, I'm not listening to everybody else. I'm just going to follow my own path.
Yeah. So I have a question that just occurred to me when you were saying about going to university. How did you, well, and school, did they put material in Braille for you? Did they have recordings? How did they do that? I'm just,
Yeah, and
I
interesting.
wonder.
And this is a funny little, I guess, thing for your listeners in the sense that there's this underlying assumption that people that have low vision or are blind know how to read Braille. I have no clue. My concept of Braille is just like everybody else out there. And I only fairly recently thought about why did I not learn Braille? And I did look at doing it when I was in my 30s, but it was kind of like, why didn't I learn when I was a child? And then the realization came to me that but there was probably no one in my country town that knew how to teach me. So in
Mhm.
essence, it was kind of like that was a skill that I didn't pick up. And look, all I can say is technology has been a blessing because the more that technology has been incorporated into the world, the better my life has become. So I use a mobile phone just like everybody else. I've got an Apple iPhone. You just grab it off the shelf and set up the built-in accessibility features on it. And I use my phone slightly differently, but it's exactly the same as everybody else's. So it doesn't even need to be adaptive technology because with technology these days, a lot of the time, with that universal design, it's actually getting built in. But for school and university, there was just small adaptations that needed to be done as my vision got worse. So right from the very beginning, I could never read a blackboard or some of the sort of, the stencil handouts that happened when I was at, primary school. By the time we got to high school, same to some extent. Overhead projectors were a nightmare. And
They
again,
would be.
um, we didn't have the schooling system that really supported people with disabilities when I was at school. So quite often the teachers, I'm sure, were just scratching their head wondering what to do with me because, they'd say, here's all the notes for the session. For the first 20 minutes, you're going to take all the notes down and then we'll have a discussion about it for the second 20 minutes. And of
Uh-huh.
course, I would just kind of sit there for the first 20 minutes because they would give me the overhead projections afterwards as a photocopy. You think that we would have worked out to do the photocopies first, but
Yeah.
quite often that never happened. And so, of course, they'd be sitting there and, I'd be kind of literally twiddling my thumbs. And I look back now and I sort of think, we probably could have dealt with that much better than what we did. However, you do what you do at the time. University, I had somebody that would take notes on my behalf, and then we used to transfer those notes onto cassettes. And my university textbooks were all on audio cassette.
Yeah,
And
wonderful.
yeah, I don't know whether that was great, psychology textbooks on cassette. Like it used to send you to sleep. That was it was a great way if you couldn't go to sleep.
Can we
Um,
just let's just take a quick chocolate break so I can have a bite of chocolate and see what my sponsors are up to, and we'll be back to talk more about Fiona's experiences.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who are radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, I share their stories and wisdom and the magic that menopause truly holds. 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
And we're back with Fiona, and I'd like to know, Fiona, how did you do exam? How were the exams? Were they oral exams in university?
yeah, both high school and university were oral exams. So literally, like,
Ooh,
even my
pressure.
my final high school exams. Someone literally read out the questions and I would dictate the answers. And I had students that were, it was actually really beneficial for the younger students because they actually got people to volunteer that were doing the same subjects the year below me. And so, of course, they knew sort of, the spellings of the weird names for things like ancient history. And so they kind of got to sit their exams twice, one with one with me and one with themselves. So, yeah, it was literally just reading everything out. And again, it taught me to adapt. And the same thing with university. Most of my university was, practical stuff. I did a social work degree, so most of it was practical. There were only a couple of exams, and again, yeah, they were dictated answers.
Yep. Fabulous. Very fascinating for people to hear about how you how you how you did your schooling. I'd love to know from your perspective, how would you like people to respond to a blind person? So in my mind, I'm thinking walking down the street with a child and the child says, "What's that?" And, wants to know from their parents, how should we be responding?
Um, I think the thing is to have an open conversation. I think sometimes, especially, when children just ask curious questions, yeah, and so they're not trying to be mean, they're not trying to be
Yeah.
disrespectful, they're just curious. And if we say, no, no, don't ask that, no, no, no," like it kind of then tells that child, oh, well, that's a bad thing, and I shouldn't be asking about that. And it kind of puts this negative thing on it. Where if you say, okay, well, let's go and ask her. And so, if the little kid then comes up to me and says, well, are you blind? Like, can't you see properly what happened? Then I can explain it in my own words. And then, depending on the situation, like I'll let them touch the white cane and just sort of give them a little bit of understanding. And I think, it's about being open to having those questions and building that awareness and sort of taking away that stigma of, oh, it's something that we can't talk about. And I guess the other thing that is really important for people in the public to know about someone that has low vision or vision impairment. I mean, it's funny when I did have a little bit of vision, and my husband still tells me people do it when they see me out with the white cane these days. Like, the parents are walking along with their kids and the kids are kind of wandering around, just kind of looking at whatever and not paying attention. And then sort of the parent just goes whoosh and kind of pulls their child right out of the way. And again, it's kind of like you don't have to avoid me and give me like this huge wide berth. Like, as be aware, don't step right in front of me. But at the same token, I don't need a 3 meter boundary around me that, the buffer zone. So, and I think if you see somebody and you think that you want to give assistance, always just go up and ask them, like, regardless of, whether it's blindness or some other kind of disability, is there anything that I can do to help? Would you like some assistance? And then that puts the ball back into the court of the person who has the disability to be able to say, well, in actual fact, yes, I'm not very familiar with this area, or yes, I do need some assistance. But if you just kind of grab them and start directing them somewhere, I mean, how do you know where they want to go?
Yeah, and I like that because we are generally people are generally too scared to ask, or either they'll think that it's wrong to ask or they'll take over. So
Mm-mm. And I think,
finding that.
we have a really, we've gone in this direction of a really sort of politically correct society where it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to ask just in case I offend somebody. And it's like, it's not offensive to offer assistance and a bit of kindness and care to fellow human beings. What is offensive is if the person says, no, thank you. And then you continue to think that then you know better.
Yeah. So how has this shaped your work life? How has it shaped what you're doing?
Oh, it's interesting in the sense that it wasn't always easy and it's still not. Like, I mean, people with disabilities are really underemployed. And I think there's all of these strategies in place. And, you look at the policies and the procedures and you say, okay, well, this should be a good workplace to work at because they've got a disability awareness program or whatever it happens to be. But at the end of the day, it's up to that direct line manager who's doing that interviewing and employing you as to how well they cope with the situation. And as sad as it seems, quite often I feel that sort of, that disability thing still goes into the too hard basket. So if you've got somebody with exactly the same kind of, skill level, likelihood is the person without the disability is still going to be employed because they're the person that can just slot into the job and off we go, rather than having to think about, okay, well, do we need to do some workplace adjustments and do we need to think differently about this? And it's not saying that that person that needs the workplace adjustments is going to be expensive or do their job any worse. It's just that they need to do their job slightly differently, but unfortunately it's still sometimes a bit of a hard basket. I have been working for my current role. I work for the Victorian government and have been doing for quite a while now. And am in a position where I do a lot of advocacy to sort of build awareness around people with disabilities and support staff as well. However, one of the things that I have done is actually also start my own business. So I do a professional speaking and coaching business, and from that, I've sort of given myself, I'm still underemployed in the essence of I've got two university qualifications. I've been working in in the industry for a really long time, but I'm still sort of not at an executive level. So I thought, okay, well, instead of trying to climb the ladder and force my way through that glass ceiling, the other option was is to start my own business and supplement what I wanted to do in a way that I can be passionate and change people's lives in a different way.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and knowing that I can see that some businesses would just go, look, that's just too hard. We'll
Mm,
just it is easier to just have someone come in, and it takes courage and understanding to for them to just go in there and do that. So
yeah.
let's
And
just take
and
a
the
quick.
reality is sorry, the reality is that your average person with a disability is not going to apply for a job that they can't do. Like,
Yes.
it's I've already thought about what are all the things that might be barriers before I even apply for that job. So presumably I'm going to be able to go in there and with something small changed, I'm going to be able to work as effectively as anybody else.
I'm sure you do, and I've seen that happen. Now let's just take a quick coffee break, and while we do, like, subscribe, and comment on the show, but also take note of our sponsors, and they help us to keep going.
Introducing 123 Read to Me. We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 123 Read to Me. If this interests you, let's talk.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon. Now, I don't expect that too many people would think that a blind person could drive a car, but I'd love to hear about your adventures, Fiona, and especially about driving a car at 160 kilometres. Please share that with us.
And no, it was not on a public road, thank goodness for everybody else out there. So, I've had the opportunity a couple of times now to go and participate in a drive day. And so what happens with this is they have volunteer driving instructors that come along with their dual control cars. So they do have the capacity to sort of, hit the brake if you go rogue and decide that you want to drive off the track and go to McDonald's. And essentially the idea is that you have a session of about 20 minutes or so and get to do some laps around Sandown. And so essentially it is literally the blind person getting in the driver's seat and being able to drive around and experience what it's like to be behind the wheel rather than just being the passenger. And look, don't get me wrong, being the passenger is fabulous most of the time because it means that I can have an extra glass of wine at dinner and not have to drive home. But what it also does, though, is it puts a burden upon everybody else that then sort of, has to potentially drive you around. So in that instance, my husband is always the designated driver. And so, especially when my kids were little, it was a case of, Mummy, we want to go and do gymnastics. And of course, where's gymnastics? Always in the industrial zone. And so then you've got to think really hard about, okay, for everybody else, it's just jump in the car and let's go. Or, whoops, we're out of milk. I can just jump in the car and go down to the local supermarket. But for me, not being able to drive isn't just not being able to jump in the car. It's also about not being able to have that freedom and that choice and having to think about where you need to be and what, how you're going to get there. And so, to have that freedom and to literally be in the driver's seat of my life and sort of, have that moment of, well, this is what it's really like was actually really cool. And, a lot of people don't understand that driving is actually, it's really a privilege. And so to go and experience that was really cool.
So what is your favourite adventure you've been on, Fiona?
I think the things that scare me most of all, so they may not have they may not have been the favorite at the moment in time, but afterwards. So I think the scariest thing I've ever done is I'm not a great swimmer. Of course, growing up in the outback, there was no beach. And so a couple of years ago, we went jet skiing. And so, you know, I've always heard these horror stories about, you fall off the jet ski and you might die. And so I'm thinking, yeah, well, I can't really swim all that great either. So I really do not want to fall off of this jet ski. And look, my husband rides a sports bike and we've done lots and lots of kilometers and a racetrack and everything with me on the back of that motorbike. I've done 300 kilometers an hour on the back of it. And I thought a jet ski is just going to be like a motorbike in the water. It'll be fine. Except I forgot that there's waves and bumps and all sorts of things that happen along the way. And I swear I left my fingerprints in the handles of that jet ski. However, I look back now and I go, wow, wasn't that the most exciting, fun thing ever? So even though it was terrifying at the time, it was fun. And I think it's about, pushing your comfort zones. Like we all like to stay comfortable, but then you think about the things that have scared you the most or that you had to really sort of push past that comfort zone barrier. And then when you've done it, they're the things that you're most proud about in life.
Yeah, there's truly some lessons in there. I know personally I would not be jumping on a jet ski. Not my thing. But it really does teach us that, make us think about, yeah, maybe we can be a bit braver. We can hop on to something that brings us fear. And I
And
know that that's really,
it doesn't have to be those huge things. It doesn't have to be go
no.
skydiving or, go up the top of the bridge or, do the things that are super powerful. It might be just, oh, well, there's a stranger over there and I really want to go and talk to them, but I feel a bit of fear. Like, just get out there and do it. Like, cross that boundary and go and test it out. And worst thing that can happen is it doesn't turn out quite the way you want it to. Well, at least you gave it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And found something I really liked on your website, and I just really want to read it. And it's like a piece of poetry. You are you are allowed to breathe. You don't have to hold it all together. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. Give yourself permission to breathe, to ask, to receive. Because taking care of yourself and letting others support you might just be the bravest thing you ever do. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And we just need to be able to let others support us. And I know that's a lesson that I often need to learn. Is that we don't have to do it all ourselves, and being feeling that we can ask. And I think that's something that you're really teaching us here, is that we can be brave, we can do amazing things and still live our lives with adventure.
Absolutely. And the best things are done when you're holding hands with other people.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that, Fiona. And I think that is just because it's true. When you're doing things with other people, it is always the best time that you can you can have.
Yep.
So I want to thank you for being our guest today, Fiona. It's been wonderful having you with us and sharing your story. And if people want to search for you, they can find you. You have your own website, which you just like to share with them.
Yep. So website, nice and easy, just my name. So fionademark.com.au. And I'm all over the socials. Just pop my name into Google and I will magically appear.
And you'll be able to pick up Fiona's book there as well. So as we're leaving today, I'd love to just leave everybody with a bit of a brew the change challenge in just being willing to go out and see people in a new way, to take time to get to know them, share a chocolate and coffee with them, and let's see where we go, discover who they really are. And so, as always, let love be the loudest voice.